The first philosophical conversation that Krishna and Arjuna have deals with the topic of death. And Krishna says, "You use words that wise men use, but do you really comprehend them? I doubt it, because you're crippled by your emotions, and that never happens to the truly wise. Nothing in life or death causes the wise to break down as you have." So Krishna says, you're talking like a smart person. But are you really smart? I don't think so. Because people that are really wise don't freak out like you do, like you're freaking out. So he says, nothing in life or death causes the wise to freak out. So then Arjuna's going to ask, why are the wise not shaken even by death? And this brings in the question, this brings in the conversation. So here, this is where Krishna says, Natvevaham jatu nasham. He says, why are the wise not shaken by death? Because we never really die. You, I, and everyone around us have always existed and always will. We exist, we have existed, we will exist. Existence is within consciousness. And time and all those things are within consciousness. So consciousness has always existed, and always will exist, and always does exist. So why are the wise not shaken by death? Natvevaham jatu nasham. Because we never really die. You, I, and everyone around us have always existed, and we always will. Then Arjuna asks, then what is death? If we never really die, then what is death? And this is where Krishna says the famous verse, Dehinosmin yata dehe. He says death is a change of form. And really, life force constantly changes form. Even in this one lifetime, it transforms from childhood to youth and eventually to old age. At the end of this lifetime, it transforms into an entirely new form. Wise people are not confused about this. So, the idea here is there's an idea of conservation of energy. It's a very similar concept to physics. That energy doesn't cease to exist, but it constantly changes its form. You may have coldness in an ice cube, and when the ice cube melts, it may seem that the coldness disappears, but the coldness is simply transferred into the environment around the ice cube. So the coldness is changing its form, but it's not ceasing to exist. The forms are ceasing to exist. So similarly, the forms that consciousness generate are temporary, at least in our experience. The forms that consciousness generates are temporary, and they constantly change. Why? It's not explained here, but it will be explained soon in the 8th chapter in different places. The reason why consciousness continually changes its form is because it has different types of desires. And on the basis of that desire, it moves into different forms, it generates different forms. And also on the basis of the momentum of its previous desires and movements, it's forced into different situations, it's forced into different forms. So throughout life, consciousness is changing because it's always searching for something new. It's constantly changing its form. And then death is just a big change where consciousness changes to a whole different set of circumstances as a result of being forced by previous momentum and also wanting a whole new, different set of circumstances. So death is the end of a certain set of forms that a certain consciousness has manifested. But it's not the end of the consciousness itself. Consciousness itself is something which doesn't have a beginning or an end. Consciousness itself is something which produces existence, produces time, produces past, present, and future, produces reality, produces forms. It's not that the forms produce consciousness. Consciousness produces the forms. So the forms change, but consciousness remains. So that's Krishna's first explanation about what death is. Now, he said that the wise people, they don't get shaken up by this. They don't get shaken up by death. But Arjuna's going to give an argument that, okay, so death is just a change of form. So why don't wise people get shaken up by that? That's a pretty serious change of form. Change of form is traumatic. Just moving from one house to another is difficult. Just changing your wardrobe is difficult. So changing your entire set of circumstances, changing your father, your mother, your face, your hands, your body. That's an extremely traumatic situation. And also, what about the other consciousness? What about the other people that are left behind and lose that contact with that person? Isn't that traumatic? So Arjuna's going to argue, nonetheless, the death of loved ones is a very unpleasant transformation. And this is where Krishna answers, Matra sparshas takonteya shitoshna sukhadukkada. Krishna says, yes, it is an unpleasant transformation, but pleasant and unpleasant are just sensations, superficial side effects of our external senses gaining or losing contact with external things. Like summer and winter, pleasure and displeasure come and go on their own. So Arjuna argued that, death is very unpleasant, and Krishna says, of course it is. But that doesn't shake a wise person. A wise person can experience sadness. A wise person can experience difficulty without being shaken by it, without being put into turmoil by it. Because they realize that pleasant and unpleasant are just external, superficial, temporary experiences. Krishna says pleasant and unpleasant are sensations. What is a sensation? A sensation is something that you experience with your senses, your eyes, your ears, your hands. How do you get pleasure? By gaining contact with something desirable. When your eyes gain contact with something beautiful, when your ear gains contact with some beautiful sound, etc., then you experience pleasure. And how do you get pain or unpleasantness? When your eye gains contact with something ugly, when your ear gains contact with something discordant, then you get pain. Or when your ear loses contact with something pleasurable, you get pain. Or another way to get pleasure is to lose contact with something unpleasant. So in any case, it's just all about the contact between senses and objects. The senses are part of a body which is somewhat external to us, and the objects that you're contacting are external to even to the body. So it's described as a superficial thing. It's not deep within us. And then another point Krishna makes, not only is pleasure and pain superficial, but it comes and goes on its own schedule. Like summer and winter, pleasure and displeasure come and go on their own because we have this momentum of karma. So the momentum is causing effects now on its own. It seems to be working even independently from us, and we experience it as destiny, and sometimes we feel helpless. So pain and pleasure, suffering and happiness are coming and going like winter and summer on their own. And wise people also experience that. Pain and suffering and happiness and joy. They also experience those, but they are not shaken or completely put into turmoil and confusion by those experiences, because they know that, this is just a superficial thing. Doesn't really affect my consciousness. It doesn't really affect who I really am. But Arjuna argues, well, it may be superficial, but even superficial things have their significance. And Krishna answers, yes, but don't make important decisions based on them. If superficial sensations interfere with your important duties, then just tolerate them and do not falter in your duty. This attitude will liberate you from karma. So Arjuna's argument is, okay, pleasure and pain is superficial, but so what? Superficial is where we exist. Superficial is important too. Senses are important. The world is important. And Krishna says, yeah, I agree. There's some importance to superficial things, but they're not so important that you should make your important decisions based on them. For example, he says, if the superficial sensations are fine, naturally you want to avoid pain and you want to try to go towards pleasure. It's natural, that's fine. But if that interferes with your important duties, then you have to tolerate it so that you don't falter in your duty. So for example, nobody likes to get up early. Everybody likes to sleep as much as possible. But if you have to wake up early to take care of your kids who need to go to school, then you have to tolerate that suffering. Even though it's painful to wake up early, you have to do it. So that's called duty. And if you have, Krishna says, this attitude of duty, of doing things which you're responsible for, even when they are not pleasant. Krishna at the end says, this attitude will liberate you from karma. It will liberate you from generating momentum, selfish momentum. Karma is a momentum from your previous selfish deeds which pushes you into winter and summer, into suffering and happiness as either a reward or a punishment for being selfish or not so selfish. So if you start to act on a selfless level, on a dutiful level, then you can be liberated from karma. If you start to just do your duties because they're your duties, not even because doing duties brings you a good future, but just doing them because these are my duties and these other people are relying on me and I have a responsibility to other people. Therefore, I'm going to do the things that I need to do, whether they're pleasant or whether they're unpleasant. If you have that attitude, you stop generating karma. When you act in that attitude, those actions don't generate karma. So then you can become liberated. So that's the first yoga presented in Bhagavad Gita. The first yoga presented in Bhagavad Gita is the yoga of being responsible and dutiful and doing what you must do for other people, even if it's unpleasant, and even if it's pleasant.